chat with Glendora, a show for living right. A chat with Glendora makes your day so bright. Words of inspiration, jokes to make you smile. Come relax and chat with Glendora for a while.
Now, Glendora, this is episode 9. It's really toward the end. I'm giving a brief outline of what happened, which was quite tragic, really, in the end here. I don't know if it's the end. It's not the end, but I mean, it's he had a very bad point here. It was around 2007, 6 or 7. Following my explosive educational featured article in the Palm Beach Post, which I'm sure the bank and their attorneys were eager to retaliate. My article was published the weekend of Donald Trump's wedding, which attracted many prominent people from all over the world. I had tried to rent my co-op in Florida. However, it had to be done through the management office at the Laco Key Villas, which is the name of my complex where my co-op was, and the manager kept giving excuses that he couldn't rent it. However, I let friends of mine use it for a vacation, and they learned of many villas that had been rented through the management office for the owners. So the question was, of course, why couldn't he rent mine at all? So Glendora, it was unbelievable. One day while I was in New York, because I hadn't been using the villa that much, I received a telephone call one day from the management in Florida of the co-ops, and he appeared very gleeful as he told me my co-op was flooded with water and it was a total loss. Evidently, the water had been running day and night for around 5 days from a broken water machine hose, as they told me. I said to the head of my group, "What next? What will they do to me next?" Now, instead of crying, of course, I tried to kind of laugh, thinking what fools these people are. How small can they get? Prying on a widow, of course, since they were aware of the fact that I was picketing and protesting to inform people as to what was going on with the legal firms and the banks, such as Bankers Trust, now known as Deutsche Bank, and White & Case legal firm, who, in my opinion, have their tentacles intertwined all over. Just as I discovered that the lawyer for the co-ops in Florida had worked for White & Case law firm, who had drafted my will, my husband's will, I'm sorry, as I understood from the people who do my research. And that's what they discovered, that White & Case, that the lawyer for the villas was the same lawyer he had worked for White & Case. Now, one really has to put the puzzle together. It reveals that it's one big happy family working together. Now, I had many questions about the flood in my villa. One was, as I understand, the villas were supposed to be routinely checked when people were not there. And the second, my co-op is only around 100 feet from the manager's office on a well-traveled private road by the entrance gates. The water had to be running out of the doors, if it was up the walls a few feet, as I understand. For at least 5 days, the water had to be running. Now, the third point was someone using my wash machine. I understand from research that the chance of this happening is less than 1% from insurance company statistics. It reminds me of years before this. One owner who was on the board, I couldn't believe it, telephoned me in New York once and informed me that since I was not at the co-op very often, and for some time I wasn't there after my husband passed away, my villa was being used for an affair going on by the management and some of the employees at that time. Of course, it was hard for me to believe, but he did discover that, and he phoned me and told me. Now, the fourth thing is, when people are not using their co-op for a period of time, why isn't the valve closed to the wash machine? I understand later they made that ruling. And another question is, my co-op was a single standing home with a patio and a yard visible to everyone, with a swimming pool directly behind my home, of which many people used from the other co-ops in my complex. So not only did the lawyer for our complex previously work for White and Case Law Firm, but also there was the head of the trust department of Bankers Trust, Mr. William Wilkie, and he's the head of the Bankers Trust Department at Deutsche Bank. He attended many conferences at the Ritz-Carlton, which was across the street from my co-op on A1A, and knew all about me. The owner of the grounds asked me in a conversation, "Are you planning to file a claim for negligence against us?" I said I had not decided as yet. He also said, "Why don't you face reality?" Okay, what did he mean by that? Why don't you face reality? What does he mean? Give up? In other words, you will not get justice? Now, the restoration of my co-op home of 2,200 square feet took much time with the insurance agent. However, my group, trained in research, wanted everything in writing, and I did have a very good insurance company, so they did come through with all expenses after much work with written detail from my group. It involved unbelievable time, as I did a lot of my own shopping for replacements. It was a total loss, treating mildew, etc., due to so much water damage to my water-soaked floors. Also replacing my Steinway grand piano, all appliances, etc., and then I stored other items like glassware and so forth. Finally, oh yes, the manager of all people, as I remember, recommended a contractor to do the work. Of course, knowing my group in New York, they wanted all answers to their questions about the replacement construction in writing. Finally, the contractor said he could not spend the time answering all the questions in writing. Consequently, he said to send him $25,000 deposit to buy the materials to start working. I, of course, was eager to get it started, since the co-op was filled with new appliances and crates and boxes of items delivered. So I sent the $25,000 deposit. My group then had second thoughts, since they didn't trust much of anything at this point. So they suggested I stop payment on the check with the bank immediately, before the check got into the contractor's hands. So I did. And my stop payment notice had arrived in time. However, the contractor had to know someone at the bank, because he cashed the check after the stop payment notice arrived, and as I recall, one of my group had something written on the back of the check similar to "written under duress." So why was this man still able to cash the check? The contractor would not return the money, even though we had no signed agreement and he hadn't started any work. Finally, he stated he would return $20,000 and keep $5,000 for his time. By this time, I had about had it and said no. There was no meeting of the minds and no agreement in any form. Excuse me. Now, we had a friend that we met through our protesting who was going down to Florida and said he would call the contractor and talk to him. It ended up the contractor would not return any money, thinking it would cost me too much to hire an attorney and go to court. So that way he could keep it. I can't resist, Glendora, and telling another story at this time, and that is that the friend who went down to Florida to speak to the contractor was a grandson of Justin DePratt White, a co-founder of the White and Case law firm. And his mother was the daughter who was fighting in regard to a trust due them. He told us that when his grandfather, Mr. White, died, that Mr. Case, his co-founder, partner, and his people raided Mr. White's office while the funeral was in process. And it is my understanding that they did some job on the money his grandmother and his mother's estate was supposed to receive. So you see, it's in White and Case's DNA, who drafted my husband's will. It's a small world, isn't it? The sharks eat their own. As we know, White and Case and the bank hijacked the estate. So it reminds me of Bankers Trust also, their segmentation, market segmentation, milk, exit, and ignore. They had their plans, and as I say, it's in their DNA. It's in their blood, and it must stop. It's not done just to me. As another victim said to me, Suzanne, we are not alone, and we are not crazy. Because that's the next thing. They like to say, oh, you're crazy, you're out of your mind. I might add, this other fella who said this is with another bank. Now back to my home. I could not get to the co-op due to demands on my time in New York. Was at a standstill with no contractor. I had some items stored and put in storage. I, of course, couldn't rent it, and I couldn't sell it. And it led to difficulty in keeping up with the maintenance and expenses. What a shame, since my husband gave me this home free and clear of any mortgage. This was all due to the bank not following the will and would not give me my inheritance, which also was, as the IRS said, my marital deduction. So as anyone could see, the money was there. As when Rutherford or White and Case said, there's so much money in this estate that it will never run out. So basically, they had in their plans to hijack the estate. Now, finally, they threatened foreclosure, of course, in Florida. Basically, I lost the villa. However, as I understand, the foreclosure process was seriously flawed, which is fraud on the court. Of course, it would again involve lawyers in the court, but that may happen, who knows? I inquired and had lawyers say, oh yes, we can settle this. Just send us $8,000 to $10,000 to start. Well, we know the game now, don't we? After some courtroom proceedings, the judge was required to send me some surplus money due me from the villa. However, he would not send it. I kept asking, would the judge, please, comply with this? He wouldn't send it. So it got to be, I guess, some time. I know it was several weeks from what I recall. So I finally got a hold of a female attorney suggested to me who had been up for judgeship. She was very understanding and got the money due me in short time for a nominal fee. I guess she knew the game, and she evidently felt something for me, that what I was going through. Now the courts are some racket. I actually heard of how lawyers have to pay a large price, sometimes into the thousands, I guess, to belong to the so-called club that all these judges belong to, so to speak. Then, as a member, they must go by what the group wants to do, as I've been told, how they want to settle things. And the magic circle, so-called, includes the banks, the attorneys, the judges, and the courts. They control everything, as I've been told. Now, it's not hard to believe any of this kind of thing any longer. But when you hear it, I mean, it just, it opens up your eyes again, and you think, my word, what next? So you see, I've had enough of this game. However, I've lost all my new appliances and thousands of dollars I invested into the stone-like tiles to replace the water-soaked floors and other items. Someone got some great present, believe you me. This all happened around 2007. I can't believe how time flies. Now, the other thing I want to put on this particular episode here is the other tragedy which happened, which was my New York home, which was around 2017. Now, knowing that things were not going well, I decided to hire a broker in New York. However, I believe he brought one prospect in a 3-year period, and he did not put the beautiful photo I had of the outside view of the house in the magazine to publicize it. It was like a vacant lot he wanted to put in. However, he could sense that I was not eager to sell, since my husband wanted me to stay there until my death, and there was plenty of money. As we know, the bank was not fulfilling their promise to my husband to form a trust to take care of his wife and provide me with income that I was entitled to. Now, the man in my church suggested years back that it would be better for me to get a loan instead of using my own money, which I did with the Bank of New York. Then when the judge in Supreme Court illegally went after me for legal fees, and actually I was due to get $100,000 back, but he went after me for more fees, it was all fixed. And he gave me an order to pay $210,000 he claimed I owed in legal fees, plus $150 interest, equaling $410,000. Or he would have the right to take all my possessions in both homes, would be taken from me if I didn't come up with the sudden amount of money, $410,000. So we finally got a private individual to loan me the money, but it was at 12% interest, which I paid for like 5 years, and it got to be a very high amount every month. I think it was near $5,000 a month or something. I don't know, $4,500 around. Now, after you have heard all this, I was paying the interest for years until one day the Bank of New York sent my check back. And now the Bank of New York was not the private loan that I got for $410,000. The Bank of New York was my first loan that the fella from my church has said, why not get that loan instead of using your personal money or any of your paintings. So the Bank of New York now, I was paying interest to them, which was much lower, but I went to the bank to pay my check one day, to bring my check, because I was paying every month. And they said that the computer indicated that they would not take my check. Now, this was my first loan. They were ahead of the loan of the private people. Now, the private individual was my second loan. So when things really get difficult, they threaten foreclosure. The first loan and the second loan. Now, the second loan, who was for the $410,000, got serious and brought me to court. And I was pro se at the time. Later on, someone helped me out and got a lawyer to help me, but the judge finally admitted she had no jurisdiction over my matter. The legal person helping me said I should bring the bank into this mess as third party. As time went on, finally on January 3rd, 2017, I'm never alone, I might say. There's always a person or a group working in my basement or in my home. I don't like to be alone. Finally, on January 3, 2017, the person working in the basement, I was on the top floor, but they heard a noise at the back door. He ran up to check and asked them who they were. So he also asked them for papers, which they did not have. This was also in regard to the, obviously, it was the second loan, which they hadn't informed the first loan about it. So the first loan should have known about this, but they never informed them. They just thought they'd move in on me. So I heard things and words going back and forth until my person yelled at me, "Suzanne, call the police." So I did. I called the police. They came immediately, and after questioning them, they said to the intruders who came in, they said, "Well, you need papers." And the intruders left because they didn't have the proper papers. Then on March 22nd, 2017, they came at 10:30 a.m. Now, you remember the judge said to me she did not have jurisdiction over this matter. But anyway, they came again. Someone was in the basement. I was upstairs in my robe. Here comes 3 moving trucks. And again, my person in the basement, since as I say, I always had protection. He answered the back door, and he was asked if he was a tenant. He answered yes, and they forcibly pulled him out of the house to a point where his hand was bleeding and I think his head partly. They were very rough with him. So my person asked for the papers, and they said, "We don't need any." They answered him as his hand was bleeding and so on, "Did you take any documents out of this house?" He said, "We scanned many papers that aren't here." So what were they really after? Were they after my documents? Because as I say, I had documents, boxes in every room in my house, and it wasn't really a small house. It was quite large. It had about 11 rooms. There were documents, boxes in every room, including the garage was half full. So it was around 10:30 a.m. It was a rainy, snowy day, around 32 degrees, and believe you me, I was a most elderly senior citizen. I don't like to give my age, but this was elder abuse of the highest order. I guess Bankers Trust, Deutsche Bank, and White & Case thought this will kill her. This will end her. There appeared to be several police dressed in plain clothes. They told me and one of my group we had to get out of the house immediately, and I know they had no inventory. They lined up in my bedroom while I had to get in my bathroom to get dressed. As I say, it was elder abuse of the highest order, a clear violation of my rights. And they kept saying, hurry up, get going." I had so much history and valuable items in the house. I had lived there for almost 50 years. Yes, I was 81 years old at that time. All because the bank wouldn't follow their promise to my husband. I was with my husband when he was arranging all of this with White & Case and Bankers Trust. What did Win Rutherford of White & Case and Bankers Trust and Eddie Jr. do with all the money? Nearly $100 million? Win, don't tell me I'm wrong. You know it's true. You remember. You said there's so much money here, the estate will never run out. And Suzanne, you are the last one to get any money. When he said that to me, I think I was just speechless. I couldn't believe what he said. These people catch you off guard, and as a person you look at them like he can't mean that. So, as I say, Win was responsible. Don't blame Eddie, even though he's involved. You knew about Eddie. As executives at the bank, you were warned that you were to stop Eddie from stealing, basically. It will affect the estate, and they were warned of that by members in other executors in the bank. When we had depositions, they got these memos, interoffice memos that we saw that said, please stop Eddie Jr. from running everything because it will deplete the estate. It will take away from the estate. But they didn't listen. They just kept going over the option period, which my husband said was only a certain amount of time. But sure enough, they went over it. They gave Eddie, with all its arguments, they say, what was that in total of legal fees? That they sat with Eddie trying to negotiate some swindle that Eddie wasn't supposed to get. Now back to the thieves at my home. They didn't bother packing boxes. They simply threw things in the boxes, since some things were from one closet or room and would be in one box mixed with other things from another room. My husband's beautiful library, including important scores of music and my books also, important letters framed, and valuable scores of music, original manuscripts. They lined up in my bedroom while I got dressed in my bathroom, as they kept saying, hurry up, hurry up. I remember I was hysterical. I said to them, you will all suffer for this. I had missing designer clothes. I had in my basement closets of beautiful clothes I had, preserved. I had kept for many years and always designed clothes and so forth. And I had many of them in the basement closets, which I don't know what happened to them. If I found any of them, they were thrown in boxes and basically ruined. They said, you are lucky we didn't throw everything out on the street, which we do sometimes. Then they added, if you have no place to go, we can bring you to a shelter. You see, I was trash to them. Here I was a representative for the United States to Russia, and also received the Peace Medal when I performed at the UN. None of this matters. You see, with the political scene, this is how they treat anyone. Glendora, I guess God was with me, because I'm doing this tape and I'm still very normal reviewing this whole nightmare. I hope people learn from this, even though it's difficult to listen to. Some people I know can't stand to hear these things. But as my husband once said, you have no idea what that world is like out there. The mafia may be bad, but the world is just as bad, if not worse. My husband was a religious man and a believer. A couple friends drove up, including a TV station that someone informed, and someone had called a TV station and they were told I didn't pay my taxes. I got so upset I couldn't reason with the TV representative. He was trying to set me up, I feel, now as I look back. My taxes were paid. I couldn't bring myself to explain in detail. It was cold. I was sitting in my car. It was snowing and raining. They were taking my home that my husband and I had worked for, plus my valuable piano. I'm a Steinway artist also. How could White and Case, namely Win Rutherford, do this to me as a widow or to others? How many did he personally do this to? I know of some, connected with Bankers Trust Deutsche Bank, who have been robbed. Now, Glendora, I've gone through these two nightmares, and I believe it's now around 28 minutes in the end of this episode. So in the next episode, I will brief some of my thoughts about what happened and what took place in this whole nightmare. And I thank you very much, Glendora, for presenting this and trying to teach other people about what goes on in this world that many people are unaware of. Thank you. Hello, Glendora, it's Suzanne, and I am giving you the next episode, which is, it has the poster of inherited problems on it, which involves Judge Scarpino when he had to recuse himself because he had worked for Bankers Trust Company. I'm near the end of this whole thing, and I'm going to read off what I have here, what I've gone through. First of all, I want to say this country was brought up with the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. And in my opinion, and others do agree, it was destroyed by lawyers, courts, judges, banks, etc. It's difficult for many people to accept this. I'm convinced now, but it took 31 years of experience. They appear to ignore the motto in the courtroom, "In God We Trust." They don't see it, or they simply do not want to acknowledge it. The lawyers generally are not there to help you. They are out to help themselves, in my opinion. Years ago, one went to their attorneys to help them, to help you. The trouble is, they would pour their souls out, and I was from that generation. But folks, times have changed. Don't pour your souls out to the attorney. The attorneys tend to get paid to bring your news to the enemy, and they will be reimbursed or rewarded for it, in addition to your legal fees. You may find an honest lawyer, which would be few and far in between, and usually from an older generation, more experienced, knowledgeable, and know what's going on, and also not afraid of the system. Being older, they will challenge the system, and you may have a chance. Remember, the devil is strong. However, have faith in God Almighty, and you are able to have the enemy disappear out of fear. Remember, our forefathers' motto was and is, "In God We Trust." As I have said, one judge in surrogate court said to a victim, "There is no justice here." They also said it to me, by the way. "You either take what I'll give you or you get nothing," is what he said to the other victim. His lawyer standing next to him said nothing. So the person took nothing, and as I was told, he couldn't believe what he had heard, and basically I was treated, as I say, in a similar manner when the court said the bank they don't want to speak with you. Another card the judge plays is to slap a victim with the enemy's legal bill, which again was done to me and other victims. Glendora, remember, I'm just trying to make people aware of what is going on. It's the story of my life and what I went through, but what I've learned from all this and have discovered what they do and their tricks. I was asked by Glendora, who is a real friend of mine and TV personality, to do this tape on my life to reveal to the public that there is the American dream to attain, only to have it all taken from you. They try to destroy it directly or indirectly. They even fooled me by suggesting I use my personal savings to pay living expenses while they work things out, and then I'd be reimbursed. The trouble is, I believed them and I trusted them. However, I never got reimbursed. I thought they were top professionals, and I found out they were professional for the wrong purpose. The people I had to deal with were from White & Case and Bankers Trust Company, along with Deutsche Bank, of course, and also with Pillsbury Winthrop Law Firm in New York. Now, in my case, my husband and I were a team. My music opened doors for my husband's business, and he opened doors for my music. And we both worked passionately with our individual professions. You might say it was our American dream we were trying to attain. The lawyer representing Bankers Trust Company, now Deutsche Bank, covering up for Win Rutherford of White & Case, namely David Kiko of Pillsbury Law Firm, put me through at least 5 days, 8 hours a day of depositions, until finally Ralph Martinelli, the owner and publisher of the Westchester newspapers, a friend of mine, stopped the abuse. He was a friend of my husband's also. He stopped the abuse they were throwing my way. Plus, of course, they were filming and recording everything. You would think that I was a criminal. Well, the other thing he said, well, you were his second wife, was one of his comments. Tell me, what does that have to do with the will or the accounting? My attorney said nothing. He just sat there. It was not relevant, and this was all stemming from an entity, White and Case, that never had any legal standing, not named on the letters testamentary. So it was one big fraud, and including a fraud on the court. My husband's first marriage was very unhappy and didn't work out for years. He had been separated from his wife for many years. Then I met him through my music, and our friendship blossomed and lasted for 3 years before we married. Our marriage was thought through carefully, and he, my husband, had arranged a second ceremony celebrating 20 years of marriage. However, he sadly passed away 6 months before the event. Actually, the comment, second marriage, had nothing to do with this. This was not the lawyer's business. What was his purpose? Obviously, we know. It was to intimidate me and degrade me, if he could. What a small person, what a waste of time and money. Which is their big drawing card, money. Glendora, through your years of experience, you have been exposed and witnessed great injustice, and was and is a legal activist, and also had a remarkable life in television. I feel honored by your personal attention and interest in my nightmare, and your belief in God as our help and provider. You are a great inspiration to many people, and you are always very positive. The IRS asked me if I received my marital deduction totaling at least $11 million. When I said no, they opened their office up for me, one of my stepsons, and one of my group, to look at all the records, saying, and as he said to me, how will you live and what will you live on? Of course, it was hard to believe I only received in 2 payments half of my legacy, initially due, it was due 1 month after death, which was to be $500,000, and I received half of it in two payments, actually way beyond the due date, way beyond the 1 month. And they had plenty of liquid cash there to pay any debts and my legal legacy of $500,000 for the first month. I think it was like 2 years later, they never offered me the deeds to my 2 homes, which I finally said, what about my deeds? I haven't received them. And, one of the comments was, well, boys, we better give her deeds. It is unbelievable. As Win Rutherford of White and Case said, this estate has so much money it will never run out. Win, you better not deny this. Of course, they always tried to stop any publicity, and eventually, as I had stated previously, I believe they had protective services tried to get hold of me, called guardianship, which is a business. They're putting people, actually what it does is they put a lot of people in a nursing home, and they want to get possession and control of your assets. Well, thank goodness we knew of other families or victims, that we knew, so we knew what to do to prevent them from proceeding, and I think I went through it on one of my episodes, what happened. I've been told the mobsters have more ethics than the banksters and attorneys, from what I heard. It's scary. I must add, Win Rutherford, attorney who drafted my husband's will, disappears and hides, since they knew they abandoned the estate, which I found out, after February 1989, around 3 months after death, since due to representing the bank for a repayment of a $500,000 loan of my husband. However, they still billed for years after they abandoned the estate. And this past June, $600,000, as I had mentioned, I think before, was drawn out of the estate account. Without calling me, discussing anything with me, never anything. Another point I want to make, that a person only goes through what I've gone through usually once in a lifetime, so how much would you really know? How much knowledge would you have or experience in these matters? Unless you were in business with your husband and you knew you were part of the business, which I was not. I was not in the business. I did my music and he did his business. We even knew of a victim who had a law degree, who trusted and was unaware, and they treated her the same way as they did with me. Now, my husband listed Bankers Trust Company as one executor who became a federal felon, which was discovered after my husband's death. A shotgun marriage was arranged by the Federal Reserve between Bankers Trust Company and Deutsche Bank, which was facilitated by law firm of White and Case, who drafted my husband's will. They represented both Bankers Trust Company and Deutsche Bank, as I've been told, and the Federal Reserve listed the McCormick estate as a liability against Bankers Trust and White and Case. Bankers Trust was a federal felon. It is my understanding that during the due diligence period, Deutsche Bank discovered criminal activities, and an agreement was reached that Bankers Trust Company would plead guilty to 3 federal felonies in the Southern District of New York, and the criminal liability would be capped at $19.1 million. The subject of the criminal charges were the unclaimed funds from around the country. This all started around 1998, 1999. It started in 1998, proceeded by the collapse of long-term capital. This all took place before Deutsche Bank purchased Bankers Trust Company on June 4, 1999 for $10 billion. Just a little summary to give you about them. My opinion is that once a corporation or individual starts their dishonest actions, they get deeper and deeper into lying and trouble. The cancer keeps spreading and will eventually kill them. Injustice cannot survive. It's so apparent in our great country, the USA, that injustice has grown for decades until it's finally and eventually going to explode, and the truth will come to the surface. They are like rats caught in a corner and become hysterical. Thank goodness we have some powerful and determined people who believe in God and love their country. Tell me, as I look back, why didn't Win Rutherford of White and Case, who drafted my husband's will, be a nice guy and review the will with me after the death of my husband and go over my husband's desires and wishes, especially since my husband wanted me to have his management company, and he never discussed it with me. He just said, well, maybe you better just sell it to Eddie Jr. for $1. He would like it. My husband didn't want any of his children in the company, and they could have either sold it or or whatever they wanted to do with it. I mean, you didn't have to give it to the son. So that was a bad decision. After all, I was still the main beneficiary, the wife, and one of the legal executors, which they should have discussed things with. I didn't confront him at the time when he didn't discuss the will, because with his accommodating personality, and they all are very accommodating personality, as though you must trust them, And I did. I trusted him to do the right thing. And, of course, I was grieving. I had my mind on other things, and they sensed all that. I heard Donald Trump on the internet admit when he was younger, on an interview, that he would try to pick people he thought he could trust, only to find out he couldn't trust them. He said it was very difficult to judge who you could trust and who you couldn't. And we know Donald Trump is far more experienced than I am. I finally exposed them when I was advised to picket and protest publicly for educational and informational purposes, and there were people who thanked us for alerting them. I, of course, had trouble getting publicity since they practice censorship, not wanting to reveal these facts to the public. In fact, when one person phoned from a paper and a Deutsche Bank spokesperson's response was, the estate went bankrupt due to estate taxes. This was an outright lie, just like many lies, they say. There were millions and millions in the liquidating stocks and bonds. Taxes may be totaled, I don't know, a very small percentage of the liquid money. And even my husband's $500,000 would be paid. However, they did it. There was plenty of money there. If they are so professional, why don't, what I'm trying to say here is there was a person who owned an insurance company. He said to me, Suzanne, if they are so professional, why didn't they advise your husband to buy insurance to cover the taxes? Why wasn't your husband informed about this? Very interesting. Anyway, again, I repeat, Win Rutherford of White and Case, who drafted the will, stated there's so much money in this estate it'll never run out. And again, he can't deny that. And why did he say after, well, I guess it was another time or after that, but he said, Suzanne, you are the last one to get any money. I was so taken back that I couldn't believe it. And again, I didn't say anything. I just looked at him. I couldn't believe it. He better explain. I guess that's why they had me use my personal money to pay my living bills for my living. When the Palm Beach Post called the Deutsche Bank for a comment, when my article was in the Post, Palm Beach, they said, don't you dare publish this. And the editor of the paper said, you are in the banking business and we are in the newspaper publishing business. So you better mind your own business. The editor said to me, I think you are only the tip of the iceberg. This goes deep, and it sure has gone deep. Other publications were stopped, including a major TV station in New York. They were going to interview me and have me on the television, and it was stopped immediately. However, I got into Forbes magazine, Fortune, Worth magazine, Absolute, Manhattan Style, New York Post, Palm Beach Post, and Palm Beach Daily News, just to name a few. Many of them had to tone the tragedy down. I was part of a Forbes article and I was cut out. Consequently, I spoke to a member of the Forbes family and I was told I was cut out by the editor who went to school with Win Rutherford of White and Case at Princeton. Forbes then wrote a separate article about me picketing in Palm Beach, Florida. There are many prominent people that we meet through our picketing that were and are victims. I can give examples without giving their names since they prefer not to be publicized. I'm sure there are many, many more. However, just to reinstate my point, I will give some examples. However, I think I may quote some scripture which I wanted to do before I give you the list. So they knew exactly, the bank, the other thing I have here on my list is they knew exactly the money I didn't receive, including my initial legacy due 1 month after death. So the IRS marital deduction and so forth. And the IRS made us very aware of things, and so we got knowledge right along, of course, and proof. And of course, you know, they want legal fees as with a lot of victims, and they want you to pay their legal fees. Now, how about my legal fees as an executor fighting for the estate? That's what executors are there for, to stand up for the right thing, for the children and myself, costing me over $1 million. And I help the children that way and myself trying to get justice for us. And what happened to the $1.5 million that disappeared the week my husband was in a coma, which was not in the final accounting? What about the trust that was supposed to be set up for me? What else is not in the final accounting? It's been over 30 years since my husband's death, which consists of constant dealing with these criminals and going to court. Now, I'm just going to give a few passages that I really want to do, which will help maybe people to understand where I am as a person and how I believe. One is Joshua 1 verse 9. It says, "This is my command." And I often would read it. I know Glendora would read it to me. She would keep quoting it and so on. "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." Another passage, Isaiah 10 verse 1 through 4. "What sorrow awaits the unjust judges and those who issue unfair laws. They deprive the poor of justice and deny rights of needy among my people. They prey on widows and take advantage of orphans. What will you do when I punish you? When I send disaster upon you from a distant land? To whom will you turn for help? Where will your treasures be safe? You will stumble along as prisoners." Jeremiah 7 verse 5 and 6. The God of Israel says, "I will be merciful only if you stop your evil thoughts and deeds and start treating each other with justice. Only if you stop exploiting foreigners, orphans, and widows. Only if you stop murdering, and only if you stop harming yourselves by worshiping idols." Remember, God is with us. God has stopped their evil ways. Now, 2 Chronicles 19 verse 7. "Fear the Lord and judge with integrity, for the Lord our God does not tolerate perverted justice, partiality, or the taking of bribes." And then we have the passage, the chapter on the persistent widow, which I remember I wanted at one time, and I couldn't find it in the Bible. Someone had told me about it, I think, and I was trying to find it. Finally, I called a girlfriend of mine in Michigan, and she called a friend of hers, and they got it for me. I said, "Oh, that's exactly the passage I wanted." But anyway, it's in Luke 18, 1 through 5. It's the persistent widow. A widow went to the judge repeatedly. Now this the version that I have is from another Bible. It's not the King James Version, so it's easier language to understand. A widow went to the judge repeatedly saying, "Give me justice in this dispute with my enemy." The judge ignored her until finally he said to himself, "I don't fear God or care about people, but this woman is driving me crazy. I'm going to see that she gets justice because she is wearing me out with her constant requests. Okay, those are the passages that I have picked out, and I think for my next episode, I'm going to list for you some of the people to prove it's not just me, it's a lot of people that have suffered from, and they have suffered too. These people have gone through things. It's been very difficult in their life when they had planned on certain inheritance or they were entitled to it. Maybe they worked for the company or they were entitled, but they didn't get it. It was unbelievable. And there's one victim I can name right now. A banker's trust was told by the judge, Scarpino's law secretary, Rob DiBella, now a Supreme Court judge, stated the money you're looking for is stolen money. So in other words, he's not entitled for that reason. It was millions and millions of dollars in a trust. Does it just belong to the banks and the courts? The question is, whose money is it if it's not his or the estate's, because it's in trust? Besides, is that statement true that he made, that it was stolen money? What's that got to do with it? I mean, it's unreal the way these people speak to you. The victim said to me, Suzanne, we are not alone and we are not crazy. So that's another thing. If you keep fighting, sometimes they say, oh, she's crazy. She's a crazy old lady. I remember one, actually, I think it was Rob DiBella, I don't know, one of them of the court said, oh, well, this crazy old lady doesn't want to settle. Well, what do they call settle? Settle for nothing? No, I don't want to do that. What they did, and they have to answer for it. And I'll fight till the end of my life. I will fight for justice. So this is one of the people, a banker's trust, and I think perhaps this has to be the end of this episode, and I think I have one more to do to kind of finalize and give you a few more informative subjects. Thank you, Glendora. Glendora, I'm adding some of this at the very end, which I think reveals the horrible things that these people can put you through, and it will give the public an idea of how to handle in case they ever come up with something like this. One incident was when Jason Bogley, my attorney at the time, filed papers for removal of the fraudulent executor bankers trust company and other items in 2004. I hired him because I thought he worked for Ray Dowd, and I thought that he'd be good at, as a younger attorney, at filing documents and so on and helping us to write them up and things like that. When Scarpino came into office, Leo Malonis, the former chief administrative judge, and now he's acting as attorney with Pillsbury Winthrop Forum to represent Bankers Trust Company, requested permission from Judge Scarpino to file a summary judgment to dismiss all our objections that were filed by my first attorney, Peter Raymond, which Judge Scarpino granted. Now, since Peter Raymond was involved with the children, and I felt he abandoned me, so I got another attorney at that time, who was Mark Oxman. Now, we immediately went to Oxman and told him facts and told him Scarpino has to go. Oxman spoke to Judge Scarpino several times and he refused to disqualify himself or recuse himself. So then, after we went to him, we wrote a reply to the summary judgment. Mark Oxman did this. He wrote a reply to the summary judgment. And Judge Scarpino's law secretary, DeBella, called for a meeting with the children and myself. It was a court conference. And eventually what he did is he had private meetings with the children and then with myself. The children decided to settle for little, which was not my desire. So that's when he had the private meeting with me, and he asked me what I wanted. As you recall, I had said this before, I wanted justice. And he said, there is no justice in this court. And then he went in the other room and asked the bank if they wanted to speak to me, and they said no. If she just wants justice, obviously they didn't want to speak to me, because I guess they weren't going to give justice, right? So this was approximately, we went around August 2002, we got publicity in Newsday. After, it was after the senator I went to, and she called Governor Elliot Spitzer, and he spoke to Judge Scarpino and said that he wanted a meeting with him. He had a meeting with him, and then after he had the meeting is when Judge Scarpino finally, he recused himself. But before that even, I had to have an article in the Newsday paper, which Judge Scarpino didn't like, but he wasn't going to comply with it. Respond to it, in other words. So, anyway, after the state senator I went to, and immediately went to Elliot Spitzer, and they demanded that Scarpino have a meeting. So after Spitzer's meeting, he signed an order recusing himself, Judge Scarpino did, which left all his decisions in place. Now, I want people to understand that when you recuse yourself, your decisions, the bad decisions he made about me, are still in place. He should have disqualified himself, which would have eliminated all his orders due to the conflict he was in. He was representing Bankers Trust, and he had worked there. So he had no right. He should have disqualified himself. So people have to understand these fine things, because this is how they get you, because they know you don't know the law. And your lawyer is usually not going to tell you, because they got to the lawyer. Then the estate was sent to Rockland County. They did one order, then they threw the hot potato back to White Plains, and they threw it to Poughkeepsie, Dutchess County, with Judge Paconis. And basically the papers went into a burn bag. So we were thrown around from one court to another, and then because they speak to each other, one court speaks to the other. So you're transferred to another court, but then they find out what they're doing, and then they follow the orders. So where is justice? It's not around. It's not there. These were not the first papers that were lost. They were lost and destroyed, what they eventually told us. Someone actually alerted one of my people that basically they probably were lost. The estate file, Jason Bogley, the young fella I hired to do papers, this was another estate file he worked on at Westchester Court, and they sent it to Brooklyn Court. After the case was finished, the file was sent back to White Plains, and we tried to look for the file in White Plains, and we were told it was in Brooklyn. When we went there, they said, no, they sent it back to White Plains. And then Brooklyn told us to go to Rockland County and also Dutchess County to see if they had the file there, and then come back to Brooklyn to tell them. So we followed all these directions and went back to Brooklyn and said they said White Plains must have destroyed the file. So we were sent on a wild goose chase to find the records that had been destroyed, which were the records, the estate file. Now, Dutchess County had a new, they had new material plus copies of some old stuff that Kiko evidently gave them, because the clerk in Dutchess County that was there left, and this was a new clerk. So she was trying to reorganize a file for the McCormick estate, because we phoned to say we wanted to look at the file. And of course, a lot of it evidently had been destroyed, from my understanding. So she was trying to gather things together. Now I went on here to say I wanted to just reveal what goes on in these courts. One speaks to another and they tell them how to follow through and what to do. So what chance do you have? You go to appeals court, you'll probably get the same treatment. You appeal it, you have to look for new attorneys, you have to pay them, you have to go through the whole business. A couple years later, Peter Raymond decided to sue me for more legal fees since the children settled and I didn't. And he did all this without a retainer agreement, as he admitted in his deposition, with his attorney by his side, Lenny Benowich. Now they were in Supreme Court. Excuse me, was it Supreme Court? Yeah, they were in Supreme Court. And now Judge Barone, who was the judge there in Supreme Court, that's where they took it. We found out later, this is another thing you have to be aware of. We didn't know that. My lawyers never told me. This should have been held in surrogate court. Legal fees are not held in Supreme Court. We weren't told that, and we didn't know it. So Judge Barone didn't care. He was going to go ahead, and so was Lenny Benowich, and so was Peter Raymond. So Judge Barone gave a court order that Lenny could basically do anything. The fix was in, and here goes another nightmare. They took Social Security money from my account. I'm sorry. They took Social Security money from my account. They also went in, I had a large account with Charles Schwab, and they went there to get that money. And I think through a lot of finagling, of course, they got my Social Security number maybe through Jason Bogley. I don't know how they got it, but anyway, they got to these different organizations, and Charles Schwab Company said, no, it's illegal. We can't give you her money. So then what they did is they posted a notice on my door that if I didn't pay what the judge required in so much time, whatever, they had a right to take my house and all my possessions. And they even ended up, Lenny Benowich ended up going to the bank and wanted to get in my safe deposit box. Now, I might have mentioned some of this before, but it was such a nightmare. I just want people to realize what these people are up to doing. Now, a little someone came and alerted me that this person was going to be there, Lenny Benowich. So they had a detective that I could hire to be there. So I did. I had a detective there at the bank. And Lenny Benowich said, what are you doing here? He said, well, what are you doing here? So that ended that. And actually the bank would not let them in the safe deposit box no matter what order he had, because the owner was not there to okay it. So he didn't get away with that. Well, anyway, they posted this on my house saying that they could, they could get all my possessions or my house unless after this court meeting I would come up with the money. And what happened was I didn't owe this money at all. This was all completely fixed just to ruin me as much as they could. They didn't want me fighting for justice and trying to get my inheritance. They didn't want that. And they were going to prove that they could destroy me. So what they did is Judge Barone had the meeting. I think I described a lot of it, so I'll briefly say he called my lawyers in the back room and said, my lawyers told me you really are entitled to $100,000 back, but the judge wants you to bring a check in for $125,000 and get it behind you. Forget this whole thing. And I reluctantly, I didn't want to do it. I said, why? I mean, this is unfair. And no, it didn't matter. Let's get it behind us. Well, what kind of lawyers do I have now? But anyway, I reluctantly brought the check to get the thing over with. And the judge said to the two lawyers I had in the back room, can we get $50,000 more out of her? Now you see what's going on. So then he didn't care. I think they were going to put any figures on it they wanted. The judge was. He had a free open line here. So he said, well, listen, I'll put $260,000 down that she owes the lawyer yet, which I didn't owe the lawyer. I had paid him $200,000. The children actually were responsible, so I was entitled to money back. But anyway, $260,000 plus $150,000 interest. So it totaled $410,000. Well, you can imagine they were exhausting me to no end. And I had to hurry and get a loan at high interest from some friends we knew. And I put in the $410,000. And that's a story that I think is unbelievable. I really do. And I hope people learn that, for instance, here it wasn't even supposed to be in Supreme Court. It was supposed to be in surrogate court. Now, maybe they would have done something like that there too. I don't know. But the point is, there's a lot of laws you have to look into because your lawyer will not tell you. They get to the lawyer. And anyway, Jason Bogley wasn't going to help me. He wasn't up to that. He was a young fella, and I'm sure they said things to him. So now I wanted to get that out, how that kind of thing can happen. They raped me economically and psychologically. They raped me. That's what they did. Now I'm going to go on with another thing I have here. Hold on, which I thought would be a lesson to people also, and that is when the bank now drew out $600,000 out of the estate account. They never speak to me, never. I'm an executor. They don't talk to Suzanne. So she's no good. They don't talk to her. So I sent two letters when this was done to two trustees that were listed on the statement where they took the money out of, namely Brandy Goldenberg and another trustee that in the past years I don't think was on it, but Vincent Comisio. Anyway, they were at the same address. I sent one letter registered to Brandy Goldenberg, which was never received. It was basically lost, and we still have the post office looking into it to this day. We're not going to drop that. This is another thing they'll do. The mail will be lost, and oh, we didn't get it. Well, this was sent, registered. So if they didn't get it, that's not my fault. However, Mr. Vincent Camisio received his letter, which was sent to the same address, sent certified. Now, he did answer. He didn't answer. He handed it to Kiko, like they do. And that's another thing. Of course, both of them, they don't want to answer it themselves. And actually, we had noticed that Vincent Camisio, I believe, is in a class action suit after him. They're after him, and he's in that. But anyway, he did not answer. He gave it to Mr. Kiko, our really great, fond lawyer we're so fond of, at Pillsbury Winthrop. And Kiko really never answered my letter, the questions in it. I wanted his state tax records. I wanted some documents. He wasn't going to answer all that. It was a typical lawyer response by answering the questions. Basically, the money went for legal fees and commissions. So our question, of course, is what legal fees? What commissions? What about me? I had legal fees as an executor. The thing is, people might think, well, you go to the court, you tell your lawyer to file. I've done a lot of that for many, many years. They go in a burn bag. I mean, nothing happens. They go against you every time. They do not give you justice. That's it. So anyway, that's how Kiko answered it, just to get rid of me, he thought. Because they know they're guilty, of course. Kiko and Win Rutherford of White and Case. Kiko's covering for Win. Basically, basically we all know it's stealing from a widow who didn't get her money to support herself, as her husband had indicated in the will. And it was there for at least 25 years. And I think I told you that it didn't make any interest and the principal never grew. But don't tell me if the principal never grew. I mean, I'd like to know who did get the money. Is this the way they invest money? Who got the interest? And, the principal had to grow. If I had asked for it, they'd probably say, that's all you get, my dear, as they did with the stepchildren, stating that they did no wrong. The bank did no wrong, and that's all you get. And you have to state in the agreement you signed that we did no wrong. Now, I won't do that. I do have principles, and I am entitled to much more. I'm not doing that. So, as I say, they get into it deeper and deeper, and they have no way of getting out unless they admit their crime. And then they keep saying, the judge, we go to the judge. Well, they know the judge very well. Why do I have to keep going through all of this? But I'd like you people to learn what does go on. This is so hidden that I know many, many people. In fact, when I tell people I know, they don't want to believe me. Oh, well, your husband must have done something wrong. Well, I don't know, maybe he didn't have that kind of money. There's all kinds of, thank goodness I wasn't taken in by any of that. Okay, now, and actually the judges I have here, which I'd like you to know, are only glorified attorneys in black robes, so let's not put them on too much of a pedestal. They actually want to see if you'll go through the trouble of hiring attorneys, getting rid of more money, and it requires money, time, to do all this. And the courts, as I said, you have no chance anyway. Well, they actually hope that I die and go away. There's another example, which we cut out the picture some years back, But there was a great painter, very known painter by the name of Hoffman, and his wife, they had pictures in the paper, front page pictures. This was years ago. She died of starvation in her apartment. Her cat and her, in her apartment in Fisher Island. Since the bank, I believe it was U.S. Trust, would not give her money her husband left her. So as you see, it's been going on for decades. The other issue I want to say, it's like another trick that they pull. They let me know, I don't remember how, I guess in some order or whatever, they let me know that they appointed Gail Markowitz, who was the daughter of Herman Markowitz, who was a CPA and executor of the estate. They made her an executor because her father had died. This is some years after her father died, but they schemed up this little trick, and they thought they would make her an executor. And I think why they did it, the law firm of David Kiko represented Gail, as well as they represented the Bankers Trust, the fraudulent executor of my husband's estate. So what was the purpose? For her to receive probably her father's commission, and her father was involved as a defendant in an embezzlement involving estate funds from the real estate manager, Eddie Jr. As you know, Markowitz was also an accountant, and he did the books. Now the IRS disallowed his commission because he was wearing too many hats. He was making money from too many sources. So now they were going to have Gail Markowitz here, probably telling her she could get maybe her father's commission or something. I don't know. They didn't tell me. But they figured also she could outvote me then with them. So this is another trick they pull. And I would think it's completely out of line. I mean, she's an executor of my husband's estate. And actually, Gail, I don't think, knew at all what was involved in the estate. I think Kiko just said, look, we can help you. Why don't you sign up? I'll represent you. And, you know, I don't think Gail knew. She was very fond of me. She loved my music. Her mother had tapes of my piano, and they just loved it. So this to me is unbelievable, but I would like you people to know what in the world goes on. The system is so corrupt, including the Bar Association, which the lawyers belong to. And I'll tell you, all trust organizations, they engage in the same practices. It doesn't have to be just Bankers Trust. It can be other banks, lawyers, whatever. So I hope they see the light before departing this earth. I hope so. I've been asked several times, don't you think they have a conscience? I said, yes, I do. However, I believe when one gets into any sin, they rationalize and get deeper and deeper into it to cover themselves, and they try to reason with their perverted way of thinking. I guess the devil is at work. The idol is money. It's like a cancer that keeps growing and cannot be stopped. It spreads until one dies. I don't believe they ever really win in the end. Remember, life on this earth is really so short. They don't seem to realize it. Okay, now I have other victims that I thought I would just to let you know. We know quite a few people, but I could give you some examples, and they really don't want their names known at this point. So I was just informed I have 2 more minutes, so these things are going to take somewhat longer than that. A couple of them I've already mentioned, and I'm sorry, I must say I'm sorry if I repeated things in these tapes, if you were nice enough to listen to them to figure out if you're interested. But one thing I want to say while I'm doing this, I have up on the screen the Steinway piano has the capacity to speak in the most beautiful and powerful language. And when I became a Steinway artist, they asked me to give a quotation. And as I said, I told you years ago when I was 12 years old, I thought God had spoken to me, I felt, and wanted me to speak through my music. So when I became a Steinway artist, I said I wanted the Steinway piano to be able to speak through their instrument. So they put the quotation down, they have my name there, and I'm still a Steinway artist, which I had this beautiful Steinway piano. And I get a signal now that this is the end of this episode. Thank you. Okay, this is the last one of my series that you people have to try to understand. There's one thing I wanted to say, which I'm not sure I did. As you know, the poster's up there on the screen, the Steinway artist, which I am, and I have been for many years. The nightmare of my home in New York, and I can tell you it was some nightmare. I don't think many people could ever try to go through a thing like this, because I lived at that home for 50 years almost. And I told you, I think, I was up there in age. And it wasn't easy, but I'm young for my age, and I managed to get through this, and I believe in God, and He has a purpose for everything. And maybe the purpose is it gives me a lot of grounds on what these people did to me. Now, another thing, this lawyer by the name of Benny, anyway, he arranged this whole thing that my house was, it was supposedly against the loan where this dishonest judge, Barone, had made me get this $410,000 in a big hurry. And this is finally, they had many attorneys, I think, but this one attorney is the one, from what I understand, that arranged this thing of me being thrown out of my house. So anyway, there were a lot of, we figured they were undercover police, but you know, I'm just saying this, I don't know for sure who all these people were. I thought they were quite vicious in trying to get us all, just get the two of us out of the house, one of my group and myself. And what really hurt me is some of my valuable things have disappeared. My husband got a piece of artwork in a coffee table, Philip Laverne coffee table. It was very beautiful, and they threw these things in storage. I had them replaced in another storage room, and I never found the coffee table. I had a beautiful Kendall furniture. They were one of my sponsors, Kendall. We had a dining room outfit by their company, and the bottom of it had a huge, heavy glass piece on top, which I did find in the storage, but I didn't find the base of the dining room table. So of course the answer is, what are you going to do with a table without a base? So I think there were a lot of vicious things they did. They threw things in boxes, like from one room downstairs, another room someplace else. They'd throw things in. It wasn't a nice packing affair or anything. I think some of my sofas must have been sitting in the rain. They're water spotted and everything. So when it came to my piano, I even had a beautiful jacket I can't find. There are a lot of things I can't find. Unbelievable. And I had, you know, posters from Russia. I had on the wall, it makes me too upset. I really can't say it. The final upsetting thing is my husband bought this beautiful 9-foot concert grand piano for me. It's a nice story. Actually, the famous pianist Lily Krause was at Steinway Hall and heard me play and try out different pianos. So she walked in, she said, "Who's playing?" My husband said, "It's my wife." She said, she has a beautiful touch. It's beautiful." And he said, "Well, what should I get her? Should I get her a concert grand or a smaller grand for our home?" She said, "If you have a large enough home, I would say definitely get her a concert grand, because if she gives concerts, she knows, the balance, the weight distribute. It's a better thing to play on all the time if you have to give concerts." So it's kind of a pleasant story in the midst of all this. But what I'm trying to say is, when they were throwing all my furniture out, I said to them, "I want to watch when you take my piano out." Because when they move a piano, they have to take the legs off and the pedals. And it's a large, large piano. Beautiful. And they said, "No, you're not allowed to watch. We know how to move pianos." And of course, I was so upset. I couldn't even cry. I mean, I was so upset. But anyway, I went out thinking, well, hopefully, at that time, I thought they probably did know how to move furniture. They had 3 big moving vans out there. So anyway, it went to a storage room, and when they moved everything, I had everything moved to another storage room. A friend of ours let us share half of his huge storage room. And actually, thank goodness, I caught the piano bench. I got that because it was sitting around there, and I said to someone, "What are you doing with this bench?" He said, "Oh, I don't know. Did you want that?" I said, "Of course. Belongs to the piano." So I took it in my car. And then later on, we couldn't find the pedals to the piano or the legs. So before all this, I'm going ahead a little bit now. Before all this, when they moved it to the other storage room, they came out and said she isn't going to get her piano unless she pays a ransom fee of $500 for her piano, on top of the moving fee, which was enormous. So what could I do? I had to give $500. I wanted my piano. So I wrote a check for $500, and the person walked over there and gave it to them. They delivered the piano with other things. So I figured the piano, everything was there. So when I checked, I said, "Where are the piano legs?" "Oh, they're in garment boxes. They're all there with everything." Well, I'll tell you, we looked many times, high and low, because there were, of course, a lot of legal boxes, all kinds of things. And we looked high and low, and we could not find them. We looked many times. So they maybe did it as a vicious thing. I don't know what they did, but I never found the piano legs and the pedals of my beautiful piano. I mean, what I went through, what others go through, they go through different situations. It's disgusting. So anyway, and I had something else I was going to read too, which I may have in another section I want to read to you. But anyway, it's something to tell you about my career, why my music is not present at this time. So, and there are some other victims here I'm going to just read off. The one is not a banker's trust. He's with some other bank, but he had the same judge I did. And Rob DeBell, I think I mentioned this earlier, he said, listen, he said, the money you're looking for, Rob DeBella said to the victim, is stolen money. So in other words, it's not really yours. Now, what does it belong to the banks and the courts? And besides, how do we know that that's true? How do we know the money was stolen? And what a thing to say. That doesn't matter. Whatever the person was entitled to, that's what they are entitled to. The question is, whose money is it if it's not his? So besides, as I said, is his statement true? And the victim finally said to me, he doesn't want to be known at this time. He said, Suzanne, we are not alone, And don't let them tell you you're crazy, because you're not. Okay, now another victim was not a banker's trust either. Oh, no, he was a victim of banker's trust. He has, no, Patrick, I don't think he was a victim of banker's trust. He wrote a book.
Yes, he was. John Wilson. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a victim of banker's trust. He wrote a book. And he's from a very known family. And he was abused in this way, you know, with the not getting money. The third victim was Bankers Trust and Deutsche Bank. There was Ella Manny Place. They divided and conquered. They divided the children from the parents, and then the Judge Scarpino was also the judge. And they got a guardian for the parents. The husband died and the wife fought. However, they got half her money, but she got control of her other money. My group tried to help her a lot with Jonathan, because Jonathan didn't get his inheritance. And they put her in a nursing home. And then she went through much heartache, stress, in court hearings, everything. Her life just ended in sorrow. Another Bankers Trust Deutsche Bank victim in Germany was Leo Kirsch, which is a very wealthy man with a big media company. And after many years in court regarding the taking of his media company, he was in court for many years. And with all the stress, he finally died. However, his wife continued with her family in her 80s and finally won a payout of over $1 billion, as I understand. It obviously was a probably much more valuable company. It was a large media company. Another Bankers Trust victim, Judge Scarpino worked 2 years for Bankers Trust before his judgeship, as we know. He waited 2 years after reporting this with the court, since it was a conflict. So finally, he got publicity, of course, with my picture, alerting the public that he previously worked for Bankers Trust, and finally recused himself. He had a legal obligation to disqualify himself. Well, I don't know who this is. We alerted another victim about this who was also affected with their father's estate in the same situation I was. And of course, I got him to recuse himself, but not disqualify, which he should have done. However, we alerted these other people about this because they were going to be in court under Judge Scarpino. But their lawyers told them, oh, don't say anything, just be quiet. So sure enough, Judge Scarpino admitted in court in their case, I worked for Bankers Trust for 2 years, does anyone object? However, their attorneys told them, as I said, not to object. You'd think the judge would rule in their favor. However, instead, that gave the judge free rein to stab them in the back, and the Judge Scarpino ordered them to pay the bank's fees on top of their own fees, which, by the way, was an enormous amount of money from them. He violated their legal rights, as I understand. And also, because of their name, they don't really want to be known. But it was a nightmare. And the other, I was also told that Martin Luther King's estate was on 60 Minutes, also Bankers Trust account, and White and Case was involved, that there were problems whether the money would go to the estate or family in regard to his documents. Of course, these things are all kept quiet. I understand that Coretta Scott King, the owner, questioned the ownership, you know, of her husband's papers. And when Rutherford claimed that they owned everything in his papers, and Coretta Scott King said, no, that's wrong, the family claimed ownership. So there was a big battle about that in that situation. Now, Glendora, I've listed some bankers trust people. However, it doesn't just happen to be bankers trust people. As I said, the cancer has traveled all over. Of course, there are many more cases. There are a few with other institutions and banks. One victim from Westchester, New York, moved to England, a wealthy widow who just had to avoid the harassing and the manipulating. She was just going through too much harassment. So she was also with Anthony Scarpino, the judge, and she died from stress. Also, her homes were taken, much property, her money was taken, as I understand. She must have had some money of her own. She did live in a hotel in England, London. So, but there was much trouble, much money was lost. Another victim with Judge Scarpino died from cancer. He finally gave a small portion of money for her cancer treatment, and she had a law background. She, because her father had a company, she went to law school and got a degree. However, the bank she was connected with would not honor the judge's ruling. So she died without having a chemo treatment, and the judge did not enforce it, as I was told. The bank didn't pay her, and Judge Scarpino wouldn't enforce it. Didn't enforce it. There's another very sad case. There's one more case I can mention, not with Bankers Trust. However, Judge Scarpino was in charge. The judge said in brief, you take what I offer you or you get nothing. I think I told you that in the former episodes. As I was told, it would have just been crumbs of what he was entitled to, a lot more. So both of his attorneys were present and they just didn't speak up. Why? Because they got to the attorneys. As I remember, he refused any money since it was such a small portion. And he couldn't believe what the judge said to him. You take what I give you or nothing. Now, another victim, a widow, fought and fought for money that her husband left. These were attorneys that were involved. So it finally led to assigning her guardianship. So she decided to go to school. It was not Judge Scarpino, it was another judge. It was in Manhattan District in New York. So she decided to go to school and learn how to become a guardian and got rewarded for her work. When a court meeting came up for her, she got up and said, Judge, I am a legal executor for the court system. So you surely do. I do not need one for myself. What could he do? He had to discontinue the guardianship for her. Another victim I know about is a very wealthy oil billionaire from Texas. His father was in Palm Beach going out to dinner, very elderly man, but he was very active for his age. Somehow the guardianship group got a hold of him and put him in some kind of a nursing home, and his son couldn't find him. He couldn't locate him. They wouldn't tell him, which I've heard this before too. Finally, through research, he found him. So since he had trouble getting him out of the home, his son hired an attorney, which cost into the millions, and finally got him home. However, after 1 month, due to the trauma, he died. Whatever they did to him, who knows, was no good. So, folks, be careful of guardianship, especially with the elderly. It depends how old you appear and how old you act. But, I have another situation here, another victim, which it's so sad. And I really can't tell her story, it's too sad. It's just, it involves her mother, who was thrown into guardianship, finally died forcefully, I think, from what I've been told, she was died, plus the disappearance of her 2 children now probably for 14 years now. She doesn't know where they are. She hasn't seen them. It's unbelievable. And I understand when Rutherford of White and Case is involved. Wynne Rutherford of White and Case got her to introduce him to many wealthy families, I presume to get their estates. And his wife is in real estate. You know, it's so sad. She doesn't want to go public. And I can't go further with the information because the story is just unbelievable. Like a lot of things that we found out about this country, country and the world. Now, also, I want to end this by telling you about a large property that we had in Collingswood, New Jersey. It was a large building, and it was being sold after many years. I think it was, I don't know, 5 years after my husband died, whatever. A lot of controversy over it. Someone called me, said they offered a lot more money that in the end the bank sold it for, and I think they ended up selling it to the property manager, I believe, which they hired instead of Eddie after Eddie got his money. It's one thing after another. And anyway, the title people questioned it in detail because they look up the letters testamentary and they said that the property, it was Bankers Trust Company. So on the title paper, Wynne Rutherford and them put down formerly, because the title company asked, well, you have formerly, it was Bankers Trust of New York. Well, it was a fraud. They had to cover up. So that's what they said, because in the letters testamentary, it was definitely Bankers Trust Company that my husband had nominated. But they put formerly Bankers Trust of New York, which didn't exist at that time. So it was a complete fraud that they're guilty of. So the title is in question, of course. And who's gonna question White and Case? I think the Forbes had an article that we had saved which said black shirts and white shoes for White and Case law firm. I mean, it's a big name, but look what they do. They're professionals at stealing. And I think I told you about the owner when he died, how his partner of White and Case went through during the funeral, he went through his papers and things. So you see, it's in their DNA, and it sure has grown. Okay, and the other thing is, White and Case, as you know, abandoned the estate. It's all very serious. These things are fraudulent. They abandoned the estate 2 months after death, 2 or 3 months it was after death, and because they represented the bank for the repayment of a loan from my husband. So they were representing the bank. That's a complete fraud and a conflict. So these things are very serious, and they've all been overlooked, and the lawyers never let me know. I wonder why. Don't you ask a question why? Okay, and then they take $600,000 now from the account. I mean, these people simply do what they feel they want to do. How many minutes do I have left, Patrick? Oh, okay. I want to state here that if you want to look anything up on the McCormick estate, we have a couple websites. There was one person we met when they did this to me with my home in Dobbs Ferry, and he tried to help out with an attorney, and he's actually an activist, and he does fight against these unjust things. And he put a website up for me. He actually wrote the bank too in Germany, and argued with him what was going on, and what are you doing to this person, and so forth. He really fought for me in many ways, and I won't really display his name, but he put up a website for me, and that's McCormick Estate Fraud. No, that's stopestatefraud.org. Okay, and then, okay, that that is stopestatefraud.org, what he put up. And then the other one that was put up, I believe by Elliot, wasn't it? By Elliot Bernstein, the fellow who's really fighting for his rights too. He put this up, and he knows a lot about the computers, the whole business, of course. And he put McCormick estatefraud.wordpress.com. Okay, so if you people, anybody wants to look up more, there were a couple, one huge affidavit that was made up of the estate by my group with a lot of pertinent papers in it, which prove a lot. If anyone cares to read some of this stuff, that's in here too, in these, yeah, okay. And my email is S in Suzanne, V as in Victor, M as in McCormick, 231 at AOL.com. That's my email address if anyone wants to ask questions or have things clear. So, okay, I think I gave you, and I've even repeated a lot of things, because such as the abandonment of White and Case and the letters testamentary, it's like a Bible to the estate. And to think that none of the attorneys ever mentioned it, except for the last young fella I had when we found it in 2005, because of course it was like a puzzle. If I didn't have the group with me, how would I find out all the inner facts? And they figured I wouldn't, so how would Suzanne know anything, right? But I surprised them, and I formed a group, and they're very good at research, so they found a lot of things. My attorneys never told me, even though I spent over $1 million on legal fees. I mean, that's unreal. And I know people who spent a lot more money on legal fees, and didn't win. So I think it's worse than we know, and we know that I feel that Donald Trump, a lot of people will maybe disagree with me, but I think we have to face the fact that when he came on the scene, he did reveal a lot of criminality that was going on in this country and all over the world. But this country is very bad, and it's really traveled like a cancer. And the estate and trust is a big area for making money. Big. I mean, can you imagine what you can steal from estates? I mean, I just want to say, I think that Donald Trump did reveal an awful lot to the public. That he educated them, actually. And he did a great job of it. I mean, I've never seen any president who educated anyone that way. So, of course, the other people are very upset. Everyone, any of you who, come against him, of course, you're upset by all this. And, but anyway, let's hope that with God's help, we'll all survive and this thing will improve for generations later. And thank you for listening. Goodbye, and hope to talk to you later. Bye-bye.
A chat with Glendora, a show for living right. A chat with Glendora makes your day so bright. Words of inspiration, jokes to make you smile. Come relax and chat with Glendora for a while.
Man said, "Father, is it a sin for me to play golf on Sunday?" And the priest said, "Son, I have seen you play golf, and it's a sin for you to play golf any day of the week. Every day of the week is a blessing when you go vegan." In August, Glendora ends 50 years of public access television. A half a century. 13,000 shows. 75 TV stations, Boston to San Diego. The world's longest running public access TV show. It always has a happy ending. Everybody's glad when it's over. Folks, I learned something new. You want me to tell you? I learned that you do not blow your bubble gum while you're wearing your mask. Did I ever tell you what a teenager once said to me? She says, I'm going to keep talking until I find out what it is I want to say about this. Well, I know what I want to say about veganism. Go, live long and strong. Hi, folks. How are you today? God made man, right? God looked him all over. Then God said, I can do better than that, and that's when he made woman. Go vegan, folks. You cannot do better than that. Live long and strong. The Apostle Paul in Philippians 4:6 said, I have learned to be content in no matter what state I find myself. And that includes the state of New York. You will be content when you go vegan, and not until. I was at the Kinderhook Reformed Church, and the minister announced from the pulpit, this afternoon we're going to start a men's study group. And I got up and I said, well, I'm coming. I've been studying men for 70 years and I still don't understand them. Go vegan, everybody. Hi there, everybody. A woman said, I have the most delicious recipe for casserole. I simply mention it, and my husband says, eat out. Now remember, when you eat out, to order vegan. Move us ahead.